By the time I stepped outside, the leaves were on fire. The brisk air of October stabbing at my face in little prickles, causing it to lose its sensation of the slightest feeling. Even as I placed my hand upon my face, it felt foreign. I felt a presence as if something were watching me. I glanced up, looking around in the crowd of New York City, and right across the street stood a man. He wore a long pea coat, and his hands were placed in his pockets. For a moment, his eyes met mine before disappearing into the crowd. I turned on my heels and began walking super fast-paced, my shoulders accidentally bumping other people who occupied the sidewalk. Sorry, I repeated on an endless loop like a broken record. I ducked into a nearby coffee shop, which just happened to be my regular coffee shop. I stood by the window peering out, and breathing heavy I looked around at the millions of people looking for that odd man. I heard glass break behind me, causing me to jump out of my skin. "God damn it, Joanna," the coffee shop waiter muttered. "Let me help," I offered, getting to my knees of the smooth wood floor laid out throughout the coffee shop and scooping the shards of broken mug off the floor. "Thanks," she smiled. I put the broken glass on the tray she held, and she hauled it defeatedly to the back room. The bell of the coffee shop chimed. I brushed off my blue jeans and looked over, and there stood the man in the long coat, his hand back in his pocket, and his eyes glaring through my soul. I backed up warily, and he inched closer. "What do you want?" My voice shaking. He did not respond. He just continuously edged closer until I had no space to back up anymore. "I know what you did," his voice deep, even in a whisper, made chills crawl down my spine, and his face was inches from mine, his eyes the darkest black and soulless. He then grabbed my arm, crushing it in his hand. "Help," I yelled, but no one appeared. They led me out the door and onto the crowded street. I looked around in the crowd, and everyone's focus was on their phones. No one noticed my pain, worry, and fear. "Say another word and you'll wish you hadn't," he said, peering disgusted at me as he cut my repeated pleas for help. He slid the door of his sinister van open before throwing me in there with no remorse. He slid the door closed before I could even complain. I was clueless as to where we were going. I could just feel the bump in the unfinished road. The pothole that almost took the wheel off jolted me the most. Suddenly we halted to an unexpected stop. The man got out the car, and I lost track of him for at least 15 seconds before he threw the door open. He once again grabbed my arm with his full might, as if his intention was to rip it off. We were at a big white building, surrounded by a big fence tucked in barbed wire. He led me into a big tunnel that led to double doors with a huge guy post up near them. "I found the last one," said the guy with the long coat on. The huge guy moved out the way of the door without uttering a single word. Inside was a hall that stretched for miles and a bunch of closed doors throughout the hall. We walked down to the third door, opened it, and he threw me in. "Stay," is all he said before slamming the door shut. I looked around the room. In the middle was a dingy, worn wooden table with 2 chairs on either side, cameras in every corner, and above the door a tiny red light radiated from the camera, almost too tiny to see. I tried twisting the knob only for it to reject. It was clearly locked. So, I decided to sit in the chair after a long debate of whether I would hold my way or not. I sat there for what seemed like years, but I guess was only about 30 minutes. Through the door burst a frail blonde woman. Her expression showed that she was about business. She was dressed in a navy blue suit, and underneath the blazer was a white button-down shirt. In her hand was a red folder. On it read "Classified." Slowly she pulled out the chair across from me in no particular rush. She slammed the folder on the table, but she was finally seated and threw it open. "Riley Jefferson, is it?" I swallowed and nodded. She looked up at me and quickly backed down. She lit her fingers and continuously flipped through the pages. Her flipping went on for ages before she finally looked up and said, "It's time to take you to the room." I couldn't even process what she said before the guy in the long coat grabbed my arm and yanked me out of the room like I was a rag doll. Before I could protest, we were standing in front of a bright red door. The woman was behind us. "Open it," she shouted eagerly. The man reached out slowly, put his leather-gloved hands on the knob, and the door creaked open out, flooded a fluorescent light. When I could finally see again, there were 6 other humans in there trembling as the woman and man entered. They had numbers 1 through 6 on them. Their hands were cuffed in front, and they were dressed in black and white stripes as if they were prisoners. They were all around the same age, mid-20s. Number 1, Caucasian short blonde woman with huge blue eyes. Number 2 was an African-American man around 6 feet or taller. He had a square jawline and his hair was overly grown, probably from being in here too long. Number 3 was a woman with fire-color curls and dark eyes. Her face always appeared between scrunched and fearful. Number 4 was a Mexican man. His hair was back in one braid and he was barely taller than number 1. Number 5 was a woman with a bob cut evenly around her head. And finally, number 6 was a beautiful woman with frizzy brown curls. In Carmel, she had a personality showing that they weren't going to break her. They all stood in line based on their number. I was thrown in line and a jumpsuit was forced into my hand. The woman and man then turned on their feet and slammed the door shut, and my freedom went with it.